The classroom buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy as students filtered in, backpacks dropping heavily onto desks. Emma Winters sat quietly in the third row, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her notebook. She was 12 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and eyes that seemed to carry stories far beyond her years. Today felt different. Today, Mrs. Henderson had assigned everyone to share something special about their families. Emma had always been the quiet one. While other kids boasted about their parents' careers or family vacations, she kept to herself. Her mom traveled constantly for work, and Emma had learned early on that explaining her mother's job only led to confusion and disbelief. But today, Mrs. Henderson had made it clear that everyone needed to participate. The presentations began one by one. Jake talked about his father's car dealership, gesturing wildly as he described the shiny vehicles. Sophia shared photos of her mother's bakery, passing around pictures of elaborate wedding cakes. The class oohed and awed at each presentation, and Emma felt her stomach tighten with each passing minute. When Mrs. Henderson finally called her name, Emma slowly stood up. Her hands were shaking slightly as she clutched a small photograph. The image showed a woman in military uniform, but the details were hard to make out from a distance. Emma cleared her throat and began speaking, her voice barely above a whisper at first. She told them about her mother, about the long absences and the late-night phone calls. She mentioned training exercises and overseas missions. Then, taking a deep breath, Emma said the words that would change everything. Her mother was a Navy SEAL. The room fell silent for exactly 3 seconds before the laughter erupted. Tyler, the class comedian who sat in the back row, was the first to break the silence. He slapped his desk and laughed so hard his face turned red. Within moments, other students joined in, their laughter filling the classroom like a wave. Emma stood frozen at the front of the room, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. The mockery came fast and cruel, the way it often does among middle schoolers who sense vulnerability. Tyler shouted that girls couldn't be SEALs, that Emma was making up stories for attention. Madison, one of the popular girls, whispered loudly to her friend that Emma's mom was probably just a secretary on a naval base. Even some of the quieter students smiled and shook their heads in disbelief. Mrs. Henderson tried to restore order, raising her voice above the noise. She asked for respect and reminded everyone about classroom rules, but the damage was already done. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she hurried back to her seat, the photograph still clutched in her trembling hand. The whispers continued throughout the rest of class, and Emma could feel eyes on her back, judging, doubting, mocking. At lunch, the teasing intensified. Emma sat alone at the far end of a table, trying to make herself invisible. But Tyler and his friends found her anyway. They surrounded her table, making exaggerated military gestures and fake salutes. They asked her if her mom could do 100 push-ups or if she fought off sharks with her bare hands. The cafeteria erupted in laughter again, and Emma wished the floor would simply swallow her whole. She spent the afternoon in a fog, barely hearing her teachers or responding when called upon. The story of her wild claims spread through the school like wildfire. By the time the final bell rang, even 8th graders she had never met were pointing at her in the hallways. Emma walked to the pickup area with her head down, praying that today would just end. But Emma didn't know that her mother had returned home early from deployment that very morning. She didn't know that her mom had decided to surprise her by picking her up from school instead of having her take the bus, and she certainly didn't know that in just a few minutes, everything was about to change in the most dramatic way possible. As Emma stood near the flagpole, trying to blend into the crowd of students waiting for rides, she had no idea that her life was about to take a turn that would leave everyone speechless. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the school parking lot as students poured out of the building. Emma stood near the bike racks, her backpack feeling heavier than usual. She watched as parents pulled up in their minivans and sedans, kids running toward them with carefree smiles. She envied their normalcy, their simple lives where nobody questioned what their parents did for a living. Tyler and his group walked past her, still snickering. One of them made a fake walkie-talkie with his hand and pretended to call for backup. Emma turned away, blinking back tears. She told herself she wouldn't cry, not here, not where they could see. She had learned to be strong from her mother, even when that strength felt like it was crumbling inside her. The parking lot was getting less crowded now. Most of the buses had left, and the after-school activities crowd was heading toward the gym and athletic fields. Emma checked her phone, expecting a text from her mom's assistant saying she would be late as usual. Instead, there was nothing. She sighed and prepared herself for the long wait. That was when she heard the engine. It wasn't the gentle purr of a family car or the diesel rumble of a school bus. This sound was different, deeper, more commanding. Emma looked up and saw a black Jeep Wrangler pulling into the pickup lane. The vehicle had seen better days with mud splattered on the sides and military insignia barely visible through the dust. Her heart skipped a beat. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She was tall and lean, with the kind of posture that came from years of military discipline. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and even in civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple black jacket, she carried herself with unmistakable authority. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Mom. She was home early. Commander Sarah Winters scanned the area with the practiced eye of someone trained to assess threats and opportunities in seconds. When her gaze found Emma, her stern expression softened into a warm smile. She started walking toward her daughter, her boots hitting the pavement with confident strides. Emma wanted to run to her, to throw her arms around her mother and tell her everything that had happened today. But her feet felt glued to the ground. As Sarah approached, something else was happening in the parking lot. A few students who were still waiting for rides had noticed the newcomer. The way she walked, the way she held herself made people pay attention. Tyler, who had been hanging around with his friends near the main entrance, stopped mid-sentence and stared. Madison and her group paused their conversation, their eyes following the mysterious woman crossing the lot. Sarah reached Emma and immediately noticed something was wrong. Years of reading body language in high-stakes situations had made her an expert at detecting distress, especially in her own daughter. She placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder and looked into her eyes with concern. Emma tried to smile, tried to act like everything was fine, but her mother knew better. Before Sarah could ask what had happened, Tyler's loud voice cut through the air. He had walked closer, his friends trailing behind him like loyal followers. He pointed at Sarah and asked Emma if this was the supposed Navy SEAL mom she had been talking about. The way he said it was dripping with sarcasm and disbelief. His friends laughed, and a few other students turned to watch what was becoming an interesting scene. Sarah's expression changed. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by something harder, something that made Emma both proud and slightly nervous. Her mother turned slowly to face the group of kids, her posture straightening even more. She didn't say anything at first, just studied them with the kind of intense gaze that made grown men uncomfortable during military briefings. Tyler's smile faltered slightly, but he held his ground. Emma found her voice and quickly explained to her mother what had happened in class. She spoke quietly, trying not to make a bigger scene, but Tyler interrupted her. He loudly declared that there was no way Emma's mom could be a real SEAL, because women weren't allowed in those units. He said it with such confidence, such certainty, that a few students nodded in agreement. Madison added that Emma had probably seen too many movies and was making up stories. Sarah listened to every word without changing her expression. When the kids finished talking, she calmly reached into her jacket pocket. What she pulled out would be the first of many surprises that afternoon. In her hand was a military identification card, not the basic kind that regular service members carried, but one with specific clearances and designations. She held it up so the growing crowd of students could see it clearly. The ID showed her rank, her unit designation, and most importantly, her SEAL Trident insignia right there in official military documentation. Tyler stepped closer to look, his cocky expression beginning to crack. Madison's mouth opened slightly in surprise. Other students who had been watching from a distance started moving closer, curious about what was happening. The casual mockery in the air was beginning to shift into something else entirely, something that felt like the moment before a storm breaks. The parking lot had transformed into an impromptu gathering place. What started as a handful of students had grown into a crowd of nearly 30 kids, all drawn by the commotion and the mysterious woman standing beside Emma. Teachers who were doing parking lot duty started paying attention too, curious about what was causing such a stir among the students. Tyler stared at the military ID, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Disbelief, confusion, and the dawning realization that he might have made a terrible mistake all flashed across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. One of his friends, a boy named Marcus, whispered something about the ID being fake, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he could see this wasn't some prop from a costume shop. Sarah calmly returned the ID to her pocket and addressed the crowd in a clear, authoritative voice. She introduced herself as Commander Sarah Winters, Naval Special Warfare Command. She explained that she had been a Navy SEAL for the past 15 years, serving in multiple combat deployments across 3 different continents. The way she spoke was matter of fact, without bragging or embellishment. These were simply the facts of her career. A brave student near the front, a girl named Ashley, raised her hand like they were still in class. She asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Women were only recently allowed in SEAL training. So how had Commander Winters been serving for 15 years? Sarah's expression softened slightly, and she explained that she had been part of something different, something that existed before the policy officially changed. She had been a member of a specialized unit that worked alongside SEAL teams, performing many of the same missions but technically under a different designation. When the policy finally opened up, she had gone through the full SEAL qualification course like everyone else, proving herself equal to any male candidate. She had earned her trident the hard way through blood, sweat, and determination that most people couldn't imagine. The skepticism on Tyler's face was melting away, replaced by something between awe and embarrassment. Madison had gone quiet, her usual confident demeanor completely deflated. Other students were whispering among themselves, pieces of gossip and mockery from earlier in the day, suddenly feeling very small and very wrong in the face of this revelation. Mr. Patterson, the vice principal, had made his way through the crowd. He recognized Commander Winters immediately, having seen her photo in Emma's school records under emergency contacts. He greeted her respectfully and thanked her for her service. Sarah acknowledged him with a nod but kept her attention on the students. She wasn't done yet. Emma stood beside her mother, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Pride swelled in her chest, but so did anxiety about what might happen next. She knew her mother's protective instincts were legendary, and Tyler's mockery had not gone unnoticed. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder before turning her full attention to Tyler and his group. She asked them directly if they thought Emma had been lying. Tyler shuffled his feet and mumbled something that wasn't quite an answer. Sarah pressed the question, her voice firm but not angry. She wanted them to understand the weight of their actions, to feel the discomfort of the moment they had created. Finally, Tyler admitted that yes, they had thought Emma was making it up. They had laughed at her and made fun of her claims all day long. Sarah nodded slowly as if she had expected this answer. She explained that one of the hardest parts of her job wasn't the physical training or the dangerous missions. It was the effect it had on her daughter. Emma had grown up with a mother who couldn't attend every school event, who missed birthdays and holidays, who couldn't always explain where she was or what she was doing. Emma had learned to be strong and independent, but she had also learned to be silent about her family life because people rarely believed the truth. The parking lot had gone completely quiet. Even the teachers stood still, recognizing that something important was happening here. Sarah spoke about sacrifice, not just hers, but Emma's too. She talked about the military families who supported their loved ones from home, about the children who learned to be brave when mom or dad was deployed. Her words carried weight because they came from lived experience, from nights spent in hostile territory and days spent missing her daughter's childhood. Madison stepped forward suddenly, her voice small and genuinely apologetic. She said she was sorry for not believing Emma, for spreading rumors and joining in the laughter. It was a brave admission, especially in front of so many peers. Sarah acknowledged the apology with a slight nod and said that understanding and learning were the important things now. Tyler, however, remained silent, his pride clearly battling with his conscience. His friends had already started backing away from him, creating physical distance from the boy who had led the charge in mocking Emma. Sarah turned her attention directly to him, and the intensity of her gaze made several students unconsciously take a step back. She didn't need to raise her voice or make threats. The disappointment in her eyes was far more powerful than any words could be. Tyler stood frozen under Commander Winters' steady gaze. The parking lot felt like it had shrunk around him, with dozens of eyes watching his every move. His usual swagger had completely evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he had badly misjudged the situation. Sarah didn't break eye contact, waiting patiently for him to find the courage to do the right thing. After what felt like an eternity, Tyler's shoulders sagged. He looked at Emma, really looked at her for the first time all day, and saw the hurt still lingering in her eyes. His voice came out rough and uncertain when he finally spoke. He apologized, admitting that he had been wrong to mock her and make fun of something he knew nothing about. It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but it was genuine, and that mattered more. Sarah accepted his words with a simple nod, then did something unexpected. She told Tyler and the other students that she understood their skepticism. For most of their lives, they had been told that certain jobs were only for men, that women couldn't do what she did. She didn't blame them for having those assumptions because society had taught them to think that way. But she hoped that today would be a turning point, a moment where they learned to question those assumptions. Mr. Patterson seized the opportunity to turn this into a teachable moment. He asked Commander Winters if she would be willing to speak to the school assembly about her experiences. Sarah glanced at Emma, who gave a small nod of approval. She agreed, saying she could come back later in the week if the school wanted to arrange something. The vice principal's face lit up with enthusiasm, already thinking about the impact such a presentation could have on the students. The crowd began to disperse slowly, students heading toward their delayed rides or after-school activities, but many lingered, drawn by curiosity and the rare opportunity to meet a real Navy SEAL. A few brave souls approached Sarah with questions. One boy asked about the training, wanting to know if it was really as hard as the movies showed. Sarah smiled and said the movies didn't even come close to capturing the reality of it. A girl named Jessica asked what it felt like to be one of the first women to officially earn the SEAL Trident. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. She explained that it felt like validation, like proof that she belonged in a community she had fought so hard to join. But it also felt like responsibility, knowing that her success or failure would impact opportunities for women who came after her. Every mission, every training exercise carried that extra weight of representation. Emma watched her mother interact with the students, seeing a side of Sarah that she rarely got to witness. At home, her mom was just mom, making breakfast and helping with homework when she was around. In uniform, during the rare times Emma visited the base, her mother was Commander Winters, all business and authority. But here, in the school parking lot, she was something in between, a bridge connecting two worlds that Emma had always struggled to reconcile. Tyler approached them again, this time alone and noticeably more humble. He asked Emma if they could talk for a minute. Sarah gave Emma a questioning look, and when her daughter nodded, she stepped back to give them space while still keeping them in her line of sight. Tyler stuffed his hands in his pockets and spoke quietly, away from the ears of other students. He told Emma that he had been a jerk, not just today but in general. He admitted that he often made fun of people to get laughs because it made him feel important and popular. Seeing her mother, understanding that Emma's story was real, made him realize how much his words could hurt. Emma listened without interrupting, her arms crossed but her expression softening slightly. Tyler asked if there was any way he could make things right. Emma thought about it for a moment. She told him that he could start by not making fun of people for things they couldn't control or for being different. She said that having a parent in the military was hard enough, without people questioning whether it was real. Tyler agreed, promising to do better, and Emma surprised herself by accepting his apology. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. Sarah had been watching the exchange from a short distance away, proud of how Emma handled herself. When Tyler walked away, she rejoined her daughter and asked if she was okay. Emma nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. Sarah suggested they get ice cream on the way home, a small tradition they had whenever she returned from deployment. Emma's face brightened at the prospect. As they walked toward the Jeep, more students stopped to watch. A few called out thanks for her service or waved goodbye to Emma. The transformation from the earlier mockery to this respectful acknowledgement was stunning. Madison caught up with them before they reached the vehicle and gave Emma a genuine smile, asking if they could sit together at lunch tomorrow. Emma agreed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. They climbed into the Jeep and Sarah started the engine. Before pulling out of the parking lot, she turned to Emma with a serious expression. She apologized for not being there to protect her from the mockery earlier in the day. Emma shook her head and said it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't be everywhere all the time. Sarah reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand, pride evident in her eyes. The girl sitting beside her had handled a difficult situation with grace and strength, qualities that couldn't be taught in any training program. The ice cream shop was nearly empty on a Monday afternoon, which suited Emma and Sarah just fine. They sat in a corner booth with their orders, chocolate chip for Emma and simple vanilla for Sarah. The familiar ritual of sharing ice cream after a deployment was one of the few constants in their unpredictable life. Emma swirled her spoon through the melting dessert, finally allowing herself to relax after the intensity of the day. Sarah asked Emma to tell her everything that had happened in class, from the beginning. Emma recounted the morning presentation, how nervous she had been to share about her mother's career. She described the eruption of laughter when she mentioned the Navy SEALs, the way Tyler had led the mockery, and how even some of the quieter students had joined in. Her voice cracked slightly when she talked about lunch, about sitting alone while kids made jokes at her expense. Listening to the details made Sarah's jaw tighten with controlled anger. Not at Emma, but at the situation her daughter had to endure regularly. Sarah had faced enemy combatants, navigated hostile territories, and survived situations that would break most people. Yet hearing about her daughter suffering at school because of her career choice cut deeper than any physical wound she had ever received in the field. Emma admitted something she had been holding back. This wasn't the first time she had been mocked for talking about her mother's job. In elementary school, kids had called her a liar when she mentioned her mom's military service. At her previous middle school before they moved to this district, a teacher had actually accused her of making up stories for attention. Emma had learned to just stay quiet, to deflect questions about her family, to live a double life where nobody really knew the truth. Sarah felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had been so focused on her missions, on serving her country and proving herself in a male-dominated field, that she hadn't fully understood the cost her career was having on Emma. She reached across the table and took her daughter's hand, apologizing sincerely for not recognizing how hard this had been. Emma squeezed back and said she understood, that she was proud of her mom even when it was difficult. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging between them. Sarah finally broke the quiet by sharing something she had never told Emma before. When she was going through SEAL training, when the physical demands were crushing and the instructors were pushing her harder than anyone else, she kept a photo of baby Emma in her gear. Every time she wanted to quit, every time the voice in her head said it was too hard, she looked at that photo and remembered why she was fighting. Emma's eyes widened in surprise. She asked why her mother had never mentioned this before. Sarah explained that she wanted Emma to see her as strong, as someone who never doubted or struggled. But the truth was, everyone doubts. Everyone struggles. The difference between success and failure isn't the absence of fear or pain, but the decision to keep going despite them. Emma had shown that same strength today by facing her classmates, by standing up in front of the school despite knowing she might be mocked. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they finished their ice cream. Sarah asked about Emma's classes, her friends, the things she had missed while deployed. Emma talked about her science project on renewable energy, her improved grade in math, and the book club she had joined. Sarah listened intently, storing away every detail like precious cargo. These moments of normalcy were rare, and she treasured each one. On the drive home, Emma asked her mother about the upcoming school assembly. Sarah admitted she was a bit nervous about speaking to so many students. Emma laughed, finding it hard to believe that someone who had conducted covert operations could be nervous about talking to middle schoolers. Sarah explained that combat was straightforward in its own way, with clear objectives and defined enemies. Talking to kids about her experiences required vulnerability, and that was much harder than facing physical danger. They pulled into the driveway of their modest home, a small two-story house with a well-maintained lawn. Inside, everything was exactly as Sarah had left it months ago, thanks to Emma and the neighbor who helped look after things during deployments. Sarah dropped her bag by the door and immediately headed to the kitchen to start dinner, falling into the domestic routine that felt both foreign and comforting after months in the field. Emma set the table while Sarah cooked, the two working in comfortable synchronization. They talked about the upcoming week, about Sarah's plans to catch up on household repairs and Emma's upcoming math test. For a few hours, they were just a normal mother and daughter, doing normal things. The extraordinary nature of Sarah's career faded into the background, replaced by the ordinary magic of being together. After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a movie. Emma curled up against her mother's side, something she hadn't been able to do in months. Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter and realized how much she had missed this simple physical closeness. In the field, she was always alert, always aware of her surroundings, always ready for the next mission. But here, in this moment, she could just be a mom holding her child. As the movie played, Emma dozed off against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and felt the familiar conflict that had defined her adult life. She loved her job, loved the challenge and the purpose it gave her, but she also loved this girl more than anything in the world. And every deployment meant missing moments like these. She wondered, not for the first time, how much longer she could balance both worlds. Emma stirred slightly and mumbled something in her sleep. Sarah stroked her hair gently and decided that tomorrow she would call her commanding officer. Not to request a different assignment or transfer, but to discuss scheduling her future deployments with more consideration for Emma's school calendar. Her daughter was growing up fast, and Sarah didn't want to miss any more important moments than she already had. The mission would always be there, but childhood was fleeting. The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparation for the school assembly. Mr. Patterson had taken Commander Winter's agreement and run with it, organizing what he called a special honor ceremony and educational presentation. Flyers went up around the school, announcing that a real Navy SEAL would be speaking on Friday morning. The buzz among students was electric, with Emma suddenly finding herself at the center of attention in a completely different way. Tuesday at lunch, Emma sat with Madison, Ashley, and a few other girls who had previously kept their distance. They asked questions about what it was like having a mom in special operations. Questions born from genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Emma found herself opening up, sharing stories about missed birthdays and surprise homecomings, about the pride and the loneliness that came with her mother's career. The girls listened with rapt attention, and Emma realized this was what friendship could feel like when built on honesty instead of hiding. Tyler had also undergone a visible transformation. He still joked around with his friends, but the edge of cruelty was gone. On Wednesday, he approached Emma in the hallway and asked if her mom would mind if he brought his younger brother to the assembly. His brother wanted to join the military someday, and Tyler thought meeting Commander Winters might inspire him. Emma said she would ask, touched by the gesture that showed Tyler was genuinely trying to make amends. At home, Sarah was preparing for the presentation with the same intensity she brought to mission planning. Emma watched her mother review notes, organize photos she was cleared to share, and practice her speech in front of the bathroom mirror. It was amusing to see this side of her mother, the nervous presenter instead of the confident warrior. Sarah caught Emma smiling and threw a pillow at her, leading to an impromptu pillow fight that ended with both of them laughing on the living room floor. Thursday evening, Emma helped her mother prepare her uniform for the next day. Sarah would wear her dress whites, complete with her medals and the SEAL Trident badge. Emma carefully pressed the uniform while Sarah polished her shoes to a mirror shine. They worked in comfortable silence, each absorbed in their tasks. Emma thought about how this moment felt like a before and after point in her life, how everything had changed since Monday afternoon in the parking lot. Sarah asked Emma if she was nervous about the assembly. Emma admitted she was a little worried that the attention might be overwhelming, that kids might think she was showing off or trying to be special. Sarah set down her shoe brush and looked at her daughter seriously. She said that Emma wasn't responsible for other people's reactions or insecurities. Being proud of her family wasn't showing off, and anyone who thought otherwise wasn't worth worrying about. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and unusual warmth for the season. Emma and Sarah drove to school together, arriving early to meet with Mr. Patterson and set up the presentation in the auditorium. The vice principal was practically vibrating with excitement, having invited not just the middle school but also fifth graders from the nearby elementary school. He had even contacted the local newspaper, hoping to get coverage of the event. The auditorium filled quickly with students, teachers, and even some parents who had taken time off work to attend. Emma sat in the front row with her classmates, her stomach doing nervous flips as she watched her mother stand backstage. Sarah looked calm and composed in her uniform, but Emma could see the slight tension in her mother's shoulders that betrayed her nerves. Mr. Patterson took the stage and introduced Commander Winters with a glowing speech about service, sacrifice, and breaking barriers. The students applauded politely, but Emma could sense the skepticism still lingering in some corners of the room. Tyler sat a few seats away, his younger brother wide-eyed beside him. Madison gave Emma an encouraging smile, and Emma felt a surge of gratitude for her new friend. Sarah walked onto the stage and something remarkable happened. The polite applause transformed into something more genuine, more energetic. Students sat up straighter, their phones forgotten as they focused on the woman in the crisp white uniform. Sarah commanded attention without saying a word, her presence filling the large space with quiet authority. She began speaking about her journey, starting from her childhood dream of serving her country. She talked about joining the Navy, about the initial frustration of being limited in what roles she could pursue simply because of her gender. She described the years working with SEAL teams in unofficial capacities, proving herself mission after mission while waiting for the policy to change. Her voice was steady, her words chosen carefully to be honest without revealing classified information. When Sarah moved into discussing SEAL training, the auditorium went completely silent. She didn't sugarcoat the difficulty or pretend it was easy. She described the physical demands that pushed bodies to their absolute limits. She talked about the mental challenges, the moments of doubt, the times she wondered if she would make it. She shared that she had been one of the first women to complete the full training when it officially opened, and the weight of representing all women who would come after her. A hand shot up in the audience, and Sarah nodded for the student to speak. It was a 7th grade boy who asked if she had ever been scared during a mission. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. She admitted that fear was a constant companion in her line of work, but that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was acknowledging the fear and choosing to act anyway because the mission was bigger than her personal comfort. The auditorium remained silent, students absorbing this truth from someone who had lived it. More hands went up, and Sarah answered questions for the next 30 minutes. Questions about training, about missions she could discuss, about what it took mentally and physically to do her job. She spoke about teamwork, about trusting the people beside you with your life. She discussed the importance of discipline, preparation, and never giving up when things got hard. Every answer she gave was honest, thoughtful, and inspiring. Emma watched her mother handle the crowd with growing pride. This was the person she had tried to describe to her classmates on Monday, the hero she had always known her mom to be. Now everyone else could see it too, could understand why Emma spoke of her mother with such admiration. The girl who had been mocked for her wild claims now sat vindicated, her truth acknowledged by an auditorium full of witnesses. As the question and answer session wound down, Sarah surprised everyone by asking Emma to join her on stage. Emma's eyes widened in panic, but her mother's encouraging smile gave her the courage to stand. She walked up the steps on shaky legs while students applauded, unsure of what was happening. Sarah put a protective arm around her daughter's shoulders and turned to address the audience one final time. She told them that she wanted to talk about the real heroes of military service, the families who supported service members from home. Sarah spoke about Emma growing up with a mother who was frequently absent, who missed school plays and soccer games, who couldn't always be there for important moments. She described the strength it took for a child to understand that sometimes duty called their parent away, and the resilience required to build a life around uncertainty and sacrifice. Sarah's voice grew emotional as she explained that Emma had never complained, never demanded that she choose between career and family. Instead, Emma had learned to be independent, resourceful, and incredibly mature for her age. She had become the person watching the house when Sarah was deployed, the one managing her own schedule and homework without constant supervision. The audience listened in respectful silence, many adults nodding in recognition of the military family experience. Then Sarah addressed what had happened earlier in the week. Without naming Tyler specifically, she talked about the mockery Emma had faced when she tried to share her mother's career. She explained how hard it was for military children to talk about their families, especially when their parents' job was unusual or secretive. Sarah asked the students to remember Emma's courage in sharing her truth, and to think about how their reactions to others' stories could either support or harm their classmates. Emma felt tears prickling at her eyes as her mother spoke. She had spent so long trying to be strong, trying not to let the loneliness and difficulty show. Hearing her mother acknowledge those struggles publicly, validating the challenges she had faced, felt like a weight lifting from her chest. Sarah squeezed her shoulder gently, and Emma leaned into her mother's side, no longer caring who saw her vulnerability. Mr. Patterson returned to the stage and presented Sarah with a plaque, thanking her for her service and for speaking to the students. Sarah accepted graciously, but she gestured to Emma and said that her daughter deserved recognition too, for her own kind of service. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Emma saw students standing, giving her and her mother a standing ovation that echoed through the auditorium. As they left the stage together, students rushed forward wanting to talk to Commander Winters. They asked for autographs, took photos, and thanked her for her service. Sarah handled each interaction with patience and genuine interest, making every student feel heard. Emma stood beside her mother, no longer invisible or mocked, but seen and respected as the daughter of a genuine American hero. Tyler approached with his younger brother, who clutched a small toy soldier in his hand. The boy shyly asked Sarah what advice she would give someone who wanted to be like her someday. Sarah knelt down to his eye level and told him to never let anyone tell him what he couldn't do, to work hard every single day, and to remember that the strongest muscle in the body was the heart. Tyler watched this exchange with obvious emotion, and when his brother ran off to tell his friends, Tyler thanked Sarah quietly for being so kind to him. The assembly ended, but the impact rippled through the school for days afterward. Teachers incorporated discussions about military families into their lessons. Students started a support group for kids with parents in the service, giving them a space to share their experiences without judgment. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about Sarah's visit, complete with photos of her and Emma on stage together. Emma kept the newspaper article in her locker, a reminder that her truth had finally been heard. The following Monday, Emma walked into school to find something unexpected waiting at her locker. Someone had taped a handmade card to the door, signed by most of her classmates. Inside were messages of support, apologies from those who had laughed, and thanks for sharing her mother's story. Madison had written a particularly long message about how the assembly had changed her perspective on what courage looked like. Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion as she read each note. At lunch, Emma's table was crowded with students who wanted to sit with her. The dynamics had shifted completely. Instead of sitting alone or with one or two friends, Emma found herself at the center of a diverse group that included former mockers, curious newcomers, and other military kids who finally felt comfortable sharing their own stories. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from weekend plans to deployment challenges. Tyler stopped by their table and asked if he could talk to Emma privately for a moment. They walked to a quiet corner of the cafeteria, and he showed her his phone. He had started following several military family support organizations online and had been reading about the challenges that children of service members faced. Tyler said he wanted to start a fundraiser at school to support military families, and he wanted Emma's help organizing it. Emma agreed, impressed by his genuine desire to make amends through action. At home that evening, Sarah and Emma sat at the kitchen table working on homework and paperwork side by side. It was a simple domestic scene, unremarkable in its ordinariness, yet precious because of its rarity. Sarah looked up from her laptop and watched Emma concentrate on her math problems, her daughter's face scrunched up in focus. She realized that the assembly had been as transformative for her as it had been for Emma and the students. For years, Sarah had kept her professional and personal lives separate, worried that being too visible as both a SEAL and a mother would invite scrutiny or judgment. The assembly had forced her to integrate those identities publicly, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive. She didn't have to choose between being Commander Winters and being Emma's mom. She could be both openly and proudly. Emma looked up and caught her mother staring. She asked what Sarah was thinking about, and Sarah smiled. She told Emma that she was thinking about how proud she was, not just of her own accomplishments, but of the incredible person Emma was becoming. She said that facing down armed adversaries was easier than watching your child hurt, and that Emma's bravery in standing up to mockery was just as real as any courage shown in combat. They finished their work and moved to the couch, falling into their routine of movie night. As the opening credits rolled, Emma asked her mother when she would have to deploy again. Sarah admitted she didn't know exactly, but that she had requested assignments that would allow her to be home more often during the school year. The missions would still come, the calls to service wouldn't stop, but Sarah was learning to balance her duty to country with her duty to the daughter who needed her. Emma settled against her mother's side, content with that answer. She had learned something important over the past week. Her mother's career wasn't something to hide or be ashamed of, even when it made life complicated. It was part of who they were as a family, part of their story. And now that story had been heard, believed, and honored. The girl who had been mocked for her wild claims had been vindicated, and in the process had taught an entire school about courage, sacrifice, and the many faces of heroism. Every jaw had indeed dropped, but more importantly, every heart had been opened to understanding.